Ash.
And I'm Sam. Welcome back to Star Wars Deep Digging. Today we'll be talking about stormtroopers and why they matter.
Just like last time. It was then that I found a new purpose for my Alphon. I reported on him to the Empire. I was no longer useless or invisible. I neutralized my Alphon myself with a sidearm they gave me for that purpose. Size and strength are nothing to a blaster. That was the day I was born. The burning blood of my Alphon was my baptism.
I guess you could say holy religions and ancient laser-wielding weapons are nothing compared to a good blaster.
Indeed. New Parsh, now a sophisticated labyrinth of cloud cities, shines like a jewel in the crown of the Empire, just as I, with my will and my training, am an armored glove on its fist. The intruders, rebel scum we now hear, are down in detention block AA-23. Were it up to TD-8 or 787, we would jettison the whole of the block into space. That wouldn't be my call. I'd rather look at the rebels in the eyes as we blast them into atoms. Wait, they can do that? They can jettison? Huh.
I'm just thinking about that part in Jedi Outcast where you're in the Lenico Belt and you deactivate the hangar shields and jettison all the stormtroopers into space.
I know, but this isn't a hangar, it's a detention block. It's weird that that would be a feature.
Maybe they have secret trapdoors.
Into the vacuum of space?
I think Palpatine could have thought of that.
Yeah, that does seem like something you would think of. I would rewatch the logged record of it for a month. I've done it before. It's important to see what you do right. The recordings that we download to the information banks allow for that. I see a look in the eyes of my victims that satisfies me, as if every one of them finally realizes that they should not have refused the succor of the Empire. But now it is too late. Resistance to aid from your betters makes you, as my Alphon was, too stupid to enjoy the gift of life. I wish I had a record of my Alphon from when I sent him to congregate with the ancients of Parsh. I would watch it forever. As the Moff gives us our orders, I feel a tickle in my skull. The headache had receded nearly entirely, but now plants itself firmly into a ridiculous itch. Did I get something on Tatooine? The mission brief didn't mention brain parasites, but it looks like the kind of planet to have plenty. And since when are mission briefs perfect? I'll have to visit the infirmary once I send the targets in AA-23 to meet the ancients of whatever planet they're stupid enough to be from. Or I would, if that's where we were being dispatched. We're being sent to a docking station. Control room 327 has been compromised. We receive orders to investigate the security breach and get comms back online. I hope the insurgents that compromised it are still there. My unit will take them offline. I made TD-787 the point man for this assault. This itch, this tickle is nagging at me, and I'll be cursed if I let some head floor or parasite from planet Podunk kink the mission. Okay, so the slang term podunk exists in the Star Wars universe. If I could just go ahead and sneeze already, I'd feel better. For want of that, TD-787 is on point. Won't be a complex mission. He can handle it. He needs to start handling it. If he doesn't call us into formation in 5 seconds, I'm taking him off point. TD-787 calls us into formation. Finally. We cross other units on their way to the detention block. MG-26 gives me a nod as he passes. His unit backed ours on Lothal. He's a conscript, but loyal. Lothal. Wonder where this guy was during the events of Rebels.
Yeah, or the Battle of Lothal, which led to the incident on Lothal, which led to no Imperials on Lothal.
So he probably left before then. We take mess together from time to time. We're due another meal. The mobs can't tell one of us troopers from another, which is by design. I don't know if they know that we can tell who's who, but I'm sure they wouldn't approve. We recognize one another by how we move.
That stormtrooper was smart. Lothal was a powder keg for rebellion.
Plus, once with the TIE Defender facilities destroyed, it just wasn't worth the trouble to take it back.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that and access to the world between worlds getting cut off, that really made it not worth the trouble to take back.
Yeah.
When we run, we may as well be yelling our call signs. There's SS-922, maybe the laziest stormtrooper, bringing up the rear of his unit, to no one's surprise. There's TA-519, the first stormtrooper I ever met, devoted and wise. PD-528 and I came up the ranks together. He owes me 35 credits. You ever think it's weird that they've got so many different alphanumeric designations? Like, what does SSTA or PD even mean?
Oh yeah, well, I don't really know, but I was thinking that this guy could get a note that could have him reassigned. Apparently, an Imperial Inquisitor seems obsessed with finding the planet Rusan and some ancient power locked there, and wants as many Imperial forces as he can get to find that ancient power.
Okay, why would you specifically want this guy to be present during the events of Jedi Knight?
I don't know, he was there during the world. Well, basically, so we could say, oh great, not another mystical force thing again. Please let me be reassigned.
How do you think this guy would react to all the craziness on Endor? That would be a beauty to see. He owes me 35 credits. He nearly trips on a mouse droid, then he nearly shoots it. On our way to the control room, I see units I've fought beside. Units alongside which I'm proud to serve. Units that will exterminate the rebels so completely and so quickly that we'll all be back in our bunks in no time, watching the feet of whoever is lucky enough to have killed the trespassers. We run past that zealot Darth Vader as he exits the office of our boss's boss's boss. I don't think Vader is a good manager of people. I'm constantly surprised to see him fail upward. But that, more than anything, is the way it goes. There are so many qualified military minds on this base, and they all defer to him. Well, being force-choked when you talk back, we'll do that. There are so many rumors about what his relationship with the Emperor must be to have such sway. I don't know than to care too much about what might be true. And we take the stairs toward the control room, I think a sarcastic "May the Force be with you" at him with all my might, knowing that there has never been, nor ever will be, such a thing as the Force. He swivels his thick helmet to look at me, and my mind races. Oh, my agents, the Force is a coincidence, is what the Force is. That's when and how the dam burst. That itch, that tickle in my brain, floods my skull and crashes into memory. Our mission on Tatooine was to locate and detain a pair of droids, and I saw those droids. An old man fanned his fingers at me, and I can't believe this, I let them pass. I didn't even check his papers, I just sent them through. I have never disobeyed a single order, and now Ow! I cracked my head on the threshold on my way into the control room.
Oh yeah, so it's this guy. I thought he'd be writing these were the droids we were looking for on a whiteboard 100 times.
I mean, did they even have whiteboards in Star Wars? Alright, but yeah, the point being, A, we're getting mind trick lore, and B, now you know with definitive certainty that the stormtrooper who bumped his head on the door is also the stormtrooper who got mind tricked. I mean, I'm not sure why anyone would care other than super nerds like us, but if you do care, yay, now you know. There are dead men all over the place. TK-421 is dead. I didn't know TK-421 well, but he was strong. He didn't deserve this. None of them did. Strong? Right. Our soldiers were dead, and there was no sign of anyone to punish for it. Punishment? I will be punished for what I did on Tatooine. I deserve to be. Why would I let them through? Why wouldn't I check their identification? My own voice echoes in my ears. Move along. I must have a parasite. Maybe I have twin sun poisoning. Panic is unfamiliar. I remember it poorly from when I was a helpwing, but it comes back now. Separated from my clan, lost in the woods as the moon set and true darkness set in. It would be hours before the first sun would come, as there was no certainty I would see it. I lose focus and the room goes dark like the woods. I snap back to attention. These helmets require focus, or it can be hard to see in them. TD-787 is doing the job, even if I'm not. He's flushed a pair of droids from the supply closet. I give them a cursory glance. They are not the droids I'm looking for. So, more mind trick lore. The effects last for a long time. They direct us to the prison level, which is where we'd all rather be. It's all the excuse TD-787 needs to lead the unit to action. He leaves me to stand guard along with my thoughts. Is there anything I can do about my infraction on Tatooine? Should I report to the Moff now? In the middle of a mission? Do I leave my post? There's no telling how urgent the report could be. Those droids were important enough to dispatch a contingent to Tatooine, the most useless planet in the sector.
Hey, Trooper, do not disrespect the Grand Moffus.
Or you won't get invited to the Moffrents.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, there's got to be one more we can make here. Like a moth to a flame. We'll figure out how to fit that in later.
Yeah.
The most useless planet in the sector. For all I know, those droids hold the key to another millennium of Empire rule. For all I know, those were the most important droids in history. The prodigal droid, the one I'm meant to be minding, interrupts my thoughts, bringing me back from Mos Eisley to the control room. He excuses himself and his counterparts. They have to go to maintenance. You and me both, I think bitterly, and wave the droids on their way. Again. I wave the droids on their way again. Oh, that's why they made it the same stormtrooper, just for the sake of this joke. Recognition smacks me across the helmet. Those were the same droids. Tall, officious Goldie, and stubby Blue. The old man on Tatooine must have spiked my intake unit somehow. There will be time for blame later. For now, I have to catch those droids. Before I can report that I'm in pursuit, my comm crackles to life and I'm told to report to command. I no longer feel the tickle in my head. I feel warm despite my suit's cooling system. I know with utter certainty that they reviewed my feed. They know what I've done. My only hope is to redeem myself right now.
I just thought of this moment from a Star Wars book. Sir, some of the men are this really hot in this armor. Some of the men are about to pass out. Then turn on the cooling systems. These things have coolant systems? Hey guys, these things have coolant systems!
We should watch a Clone Apart again someday. There. The blue asteroid rolls with purpose while Goldie struggles to keep up. I raise my fire. 2 shots is all it will take. My call sign rings out in my comm again. I shake it off and take aim. I'll put a hole through the blue one first. TD-110, lower your weapon, the moth sighs urbanely, and you report to command. Are you awaiting an engraved invitation? Consider this that, he looks at me from the corner of his eye, and go. But, I say, and he stops me with a look. The Force really does not want 3PO and R2 dead. I'm torn. I want to defend myself. I know my future hangs on this moment. I may grumble and grouse when I'm spent and tired, but all I possess in this life is the need to serve the Empire. Further comment is not required, TD-110. All that is required is compliance.
Oh, I just thought of this. Basically, let me tell you about the will of the Force. Well, here's one time where during the age of the Rakatan Infinite Empire, here's the time where the will of the Force abandoned the Rakata, and then when the slave uprising happened, they were like, hey, we can take them. We have plot armor, remember? No, we don't. The Force abandoned us. Oh.
Indeed. I lower my weapon, bite my lip, and watch the 2 droids leave the docking station. PB-106 relieves me of my weapon. He and his unit escort me to command. I know better than to speak unless spoken to, and they know better than to speak to me. I cannot read anything in PB-106's gait. Not sympathy, not duty, not anger. I'll never be able to ask because the mobs have seen the feed and now they'll expel me from the Death Star. Probably to some floating ice chunk like Ottinger 7. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that planet before. Spend the remainder of my days shivering and dodging wooing long-tailed toads. I had taken the hallways one last time. I love this place. More than anywhere I've been, it was home. I swear to the ancients of Parsh and the elders of the Empire, if I have to fight for 100 years, I will prove myself. I'll return to the Death Star. I swear I will fight my way back home. End of Watch by Adam Christopher. Commander Pamela Poole rolled her neck and stood from the command chair, lifting the datapad in her hand to check the time. Just 10 minutes to go. 10 long minutes until the end of another 12-hour shift of almost nothing at all. 12 hours of routine, a protocol of answering simple queries, giving simple orders. Man, sounds like my dream job. 12 hours of supervising a skeleton crew as they monitor the largely autonomous redundant systems of the largest battle station in the history of the galaxy. And that suited Commander Poole perfectly. She may have been a career officer, one dedicated more to the Imperial Navy than to the Emperor it served, but she was no warrior. Unlike many of her childhood friends who grew up in a more affluent sector of the Coruscant Ecumenopolis. I mean, calling it the Coruscant Ecumenopolis is kind of redundant, because Coruscant is... like, the whole point of Coruscant is that everywhere on the planet is part of the Ecumenopolis. It looks like this is going to be another story where I'm really running out of things to talk about. Poe had never had any desire to be a pilot or a field officer. She never had any desire to serve on the front lines. Never had any desire to be a hero. You see, I never had the chance to serve in battle, nor did fate provide me with the opportunity to sacrifice myself for the Empire as it did for so many others during the Galactic Civil War. Sorry, occasionally I have to make references that you don't get.
Oh.
Take a shot.
Alright.
Because the business of the Imperial Navy was one of war, and in war, being a hero got you killed. And with the Empire's struggle against the rebel insurgency feeling like it was about to reach a flashpoint, dying in battle was the last thing Pama Pole intended to do. No, Commander Pole was an administrator. She reveled in the functions of an executive officer, logistics, management, supervision. Yes, it was dull. It could be boring, but she enjoyed her work, and more important, she was good at it. Good enough to earn a quick promotion, good enough to be assigned to the Empire's greatest technological achievements, the DS-1 Orbital Battle Station, as a station commander. Though the Death Star didn't require much actual command, was irrelevant. The battle station was so vast, 160 kilometers in diameter with a full crew rumored to number more than 1 million, although the exact number remained classified. Probably a meta joke about how the number is kind of inconsistent between sources. I'll look it up later. That it would be impossible for it to be run from a single control room or command center. What the Death Star had instead was a multitude of command posts, communication posts, and supervisor stations scattered at various levels across the station sectors, all of which fell under the watch of one of the 4 control rooms, each positioned mid-level in one of the station's hemispheres. Commander Bull was assigned to Station Control West. Station Control West? So there's only like 4 of them? There's gotta be more than that. The Death Star is huge. And while it was possible for her to take direct control of the Death Star systems if absolutely required, Bull was proud of the fact that hundreds of thousands of station's crew in her hemisphere depended on her constant vigilance. One person to manage hundreds of thousands? Not sure that's logistically possible. And as she put her datapad to sleep, Bull glanced around the room. Station Control West, like its 3 counterparts, was a circular chamber, the circumference lined with monitor consoles, at which sat 24 ensigns and junior officers. Patiently staring at monitors, checking readings, the room filled with the constant sound of their murmurings as they quietly spoke into their headsets. Kinda reminds me of that one room from LEGO Star Wars. Above the ring of consoles, 4 huge trapezoidal display screens shone, one at each of the compress points, providing a continuous stream of status information. The data was almost too much to be taken in, but Poe appreciated the at-a-glance updates for various systems she was I'm listening, Sam.
Oh. I was just about to say that when it comes to Imperial systems and a lot of stuff, the Empire dumps a lot of information on their computers and drives, which could be a useful thing for rebel agents to discover and useful for the rebellion to figure out what the Empire's next step is.
Yeah, they have a tendency of leaving way too much classified intel just lying around where anyone can find it. In such conveniently small data file size, too. They should pad out their stuff a bit more. One of which had been causing something of a minor headache for the last 30 minutes. Hull stepped down from the command dais and folded her arms as she glanced up at the screen directly ahead. On it, a swarm of ever-moving multicolored indicators representing tower control for hangars 250 to 350 crawled like zest flies, but Poe ignored the confusing mess, focusing instead on a red block that pulsed on the left-hand side. Docking Bay 327 was on lockdown, all traffic diverted to Base 328 and 329. Flight delays were not uncommon, an unavoidable consequence of the sheer volume of traffic and coordination this required, both automated and manually supervised, between the 500 different hangars and docking bays that were buried all over the skin of the battle station. Having Docking Bay 327 out of action was, in reality, nothing more than a minor inconvenience, but it would remain an annoying status alert, stalling her otherwise perfect shift report, unless she could get the diversions cleared in the next... She checked the time on her datapad again. 7 minutes. Poe frowned and headed over to the monitor station beneath the display. 2 crew were positioned at their control consoles. One, Ensign 2's, hunched across the controls as he stared at He stared at a small square display in front of him, while his companion, Onion Sub-Lieutenant Slalin, leaned back in her seat, arms folded, shaking her head. As Pole approached, neither seemed aware of her presence. "Remind me again," said Sloan. "What am I looking at here?" Tews clicked his tongue and tapped the screen with an index finger. "Come on, you're telling me you don't recognize a classic when you see one?" He whistled softly between his teeth. "Just wait until I tell your brother when he gets back from Scarif." "Oh."
How do we tell him?
"Indeed." Sloan cocked her head. "What I do recognize, Ensign, is a piece of junk when I see one. I'm amazed it didn't break up as soon as the tractor beam got unlocked." "Piece of junk?" "Sub-Lieutenant Sloan, I really do. That piece of junk, as you call it, is a YT-1300 light freighter," said Pole, resting one hand on the back of Sloan's chair, "that is currently disrupting the docking bay schedule." Sloan and Tews immediately straightened up, their backs ramrod straight. Tews cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am." "Don't apologize, Ensign," said Pole. "Just get the docking bay cleared now." "Ma'am," said Sloan, "Captain Kirgy still has a scanning crew aboard the vessel. We need an all clear from the hangar deck before we can lift the lockdown." So yeah, in case you're wondering who that guy from the A Presence I've Not Felt Since scene was, his name is Kirgy. "Get me a scanning crew out here on the double. I want every part of the ship checked." I probably shouldn't have every line of dialogue memorized.
Speaking of that, it reminds me of this. "And yet, I feel a presence I have not felt since..." Oh no, I gotta get some high ground.
I mean, his armor makes him quite a bit taller. That's basically permanent high ground. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. Do an apology. Oh, wait. We need an all clear from the hangar deck before we can lift the lockdown."
I got nothing.
Okay. Sorry, I thought I saw you leaning towards me. "The scan still isn't finished? What are they doing down there?" Tews and Sloan said nothing, both junior officers just looking up at their commander. Pole sighed. "Fine," she said. "Continue."
Oh, it's a different Sloan. I was thinking Ray Sloan.
I didn't say Sloan. We've got Tews, Slalin, Pole...
Slalin. That was it. I got my brain mixed it up.
Sloan's still aboard one of the Star Destroyers at this point, though I can't remember which one. On the other side of the control room, the turbo lift hissed open. Pole turned and saw our shift replacement step out. "Actually, no," said Pole. "You can let Commander Sheard know." Pole turned around and gave Sheard a casual salute, which he returned before heading around the arc of the room toward her. Pole handed the datapad to our fellow officer and briefed him on the events of the last ship. In particular, on the status of the mystery freighter currently holding up the schedule down in docking bay 327. Sheard nodded as he listened, brushing one more index finger along the underside of the thick mustache. Then he tapped the back of Tew's chair. "Show me the ship. Main screen." "Sir." Ensign Tew swung back around to his console. He snapped a switch, and the view of the freighter in the docking bay shown on his console screen flashed up onto the main wall display. Tews and Slalin sat back and looked up at the image, while Pole took a step back and tapped a finger on the edge of her datapad. "I didn't even know these things were still flying," said Commander Sheard. Pole nodded. He was right. The YT-1300 was an old ship, virtually a relic. I mean, you're in a galaxy where things can last for thousands of years. Something that's like a century old, give or take a few decades.
Just because something looks like a relic doesn't mean it is a relic.
Indeed. And the example down in docking bay 327 was no exception, she thought as she gazed over the screen. The vessel was battered, the hull carbon scored in several places, the vector thrust plates that cradled the main drive ports in serious needs of not just cleaning but replacing altogether. But there was something else about the ship. Pole had seen a couple of YT series freighters in her time. Maybe a YT-2400 perhaps. Both long past their service and certainly not operational. And, well, she couldn't remember the exact models. This one looked different.
Oh, yeah. I'm also thinking, I'm also thinking when Han hears these stormtroopers talking like this about the Falcon, there's an option appears in the part of the menu. It says, "Embrace the darkness." So Han does.
Poor guy. This one looked different. Wasn't the sensor disc larger than standard? In the dorsal armament, it was a quad laser cannon. The YT-1300 had weapons, certainly, but a gun like that just had to be unlicensed. Paul didn't know why the ship had been captured and dragged into the docking bay, but there was more than a fair chance it was smugglers or pirates. That made sense. The ship was modified, customized, far beyond factory specs. Although quite what the Dev Star was doing policing the hyperspace lanes was another question entirely.
Okay, 2 questions about those pirates. One, does any of those pirates wield a lightsaber by any chance? And 2, is there any chance that one of those pirates is carrying black socks that we need?
Phineas and Ferb. We should just rewatch that annually. It never gets old. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Poole cocked her head as she looked at the display. Mansutu said you have a brother on Scarif, Sloan. Ship designer? Not sure why she would make that assumption. Were there a lot of ship designers assigned to Scarif? Yeah. Sub-Lieutenant Sloan turned in her chair. Naval architect, ma'am. We took starship design together as an elective at the academy, but he was the one with the talents. She turned and pointed back at the main display. You don't see many working examples of this older kind of ship. I'll have to send him a data tape once he's out of operations. What's his assignment? Asked Commander Sheard. Sloan gave a shrug. I don't know, sir. The operation on Scarif is classified. I haven't heard from him in 4 weeks. Okay, it has to... This is the problem with the retcon that Timelines gave. Probably to fit with Andor, that Rogue One takes place a whole year before the Battle of Yavin.
Me personally, I would not trust Star Wars timelines. The entire timeline is an enigma, and basically everything written in the book is not set in stone.
Yeah, subject to all sorts of retcons. But in order for it to work, the events of A New Hope would have to take place over the course of many, many months. And there would have to also be a several-month time skip between Rogue One and the beginning of A New Hope itself. Now, that would fit with certain legend stuff, like, for example, everything that was going on with Big Starglider, but still. You think they'll ever retcon the Clone Wars to be like 6 years instead of 3, just to fit in all the Clone Wars era stuff?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but I'm sure there's probably gonna be a lot of fans who use that headcanon regardless. Also, I wonder how classified what happened on Scarif is if, like, someone aboard the Death Star, which was at Scarif, doesn't know about it. Granted, the Death Star is pretty big, so it's possible that he just missed the camera. She just missed the cameras showing where the ship was at that point. I mean, the station. She slumped just a little in her chair. We are due to meet for shortly,
I think I have a short answer for that. Basically, Tarkin says to every Imperial officer gathered on the Death Star in a meeting, oh, and if someone mentions what happened on Scarif, they will be executed for treason. Good day.
Well, I mean, if he told everyone that, they'd get suspicious. He probably only told a few people that. Also, you do know what treason means, Sam, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just had to be sure. We are due to meet for shortly, but I haven't heard from him yet. I guess his operation has been extended. Quite possibly, said Cole, and she left it at that. Because she knew something the sub-lieutenant clearly didn't. The Death Star itself had been at Scarif and had left the system just 3 days ago. Okay, this is where, like, the timeline given here can't possibly be canon. There's no way to fit everything in if it's only been 3 days. Sloan was right. The operation on the planet was classified. Commander Pole had been on duty and was of a senior enough rank to have been informed of their destination, but even she hadn't known what the station's mission there was. There was talk in her midst that was another shakedown run, something about a second test following the first one over the moon of Jeddah. Though a test of what, Pole didn't know.
I am telling you, the inner machinations of the Star Wars timeline are an enigma.
Also, test? Like, surely everyone's got to know what the Death Star does at this point, right? This is after Alderaan got reduced to smithereens. But that was the thing about the Death Star. The battle station was so big that sort of a Star Destroyer crashing into it, most of the crew would have no idea what was going on at any given time. Okay, that's a lore detail I like. Only essential mission personnel had the required clearance. Paul understood that. It was a matter not just of security, but also of pure logistics. Paul nodded at Commander Sheard. Her watch was over and it was time to go. Station Control West is... An alarm chimed from the console in front of Ensign 2's. Paul saw a red light flashing by his hand, quickly joined by another. Next to the ensign, Sloan glanced over her own console, checking systems, while 2's began cycling through a series of switches, peering at his monitor as he did so, a frown firmly etched on his face. Pole and Sheard exchanged a glance, then Pole leaned over the console between her two junior officers. Something wrong? Yes, ma'am. Maybe. 2's flicked some more switches, then twisted a dial as he began cycling through a series of surveillance frequencies patched into the station's security system. On his small display, the view of the document was replaced by screen after screen of roaring static as he flicked through the channels. At her console, Sloan had one hand on her earpiece as she listened. Then she acknowledged the message and turned to the two commanders. There's an alarm from Level 5, Detention Block AA-23. Subcontrol reports all sensors in the block have gone down. Confirmed, said 2's, pointing to his display of rolling static. All cams are out. Pole glanced at Commander Sheard, who folded his arms and stepped back. All yours, Commander. Thank you, she said before turning back to the ensign. Put me through to the detention block. 2 cycled his comm again and opened the channel, but the light beside the switch changed not from red to green as expected, but from red to blue.
Code blue? Blue alert? That's all the terms I have.
They have their comm in secure mode. Oh, that's what it means. The ensign looked up at Commander Pole. We'll have to wait for them to answer. Pole lifted her data pad and quickly swiped through to the station directory. Her eyes flicked over the data, then she nodded. Detention Block AA-23 is reserved for political prisoners, she said, so secure comm is standard.
Oh, speaking of that, I ordered everyone into yellow alert. Should we move on to red now?
Nice. Also, political prisoners? Isn't everyone aboard the Death Star a political prisoner? Like, I'm fairly certain they're now throwing people into the brig for jaywalking and... Like, is there a section of the brig devoted to if stormtroopers get drunk and a bit too rowdy? I don't get it.
Well, the Empire might be doing that now because PORD, resentencing directives.
Indeed. That was when the deck chimed. Pole moved closer to the console as 2's opened the channel. The ensign opened his mouth to speak, only for the operator on the other end to cut in first. Everything's under control. Situation normal. Pole glanced up at Sheard, who frowned. 2's and Schoen looked at each other. Then 2's pressed the comm switch again. What happens? Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. Pole didn't recognize the voice, but whoever it was, they sounded almost breathless. She glanced down at her datapad to check, but then looked up in surprise as the voice spoke again. How are you? 2's looked back at Sloan, who nodded. He leaned back over the comm. We're sending a squad in. The channel clicked back into life. Negative. We have a reactor leak here now. Just give us a few minutes to lock it down. Large leak, very dangerous.
Reactor leak? Send in the radiation troopers.
Also, what was Han thinking about saying there was a reactor in the detention block? I know that's a joke plenty of people have made before, but it needs to be said. Who's the duty officer down there? Asked Commander Sheard. Pole checked her datapad. Lieutenant Childson. So 2 shook his head. Man, that doesn't sound like Lieutenant Childson. He pressed... the Wookiee racist. He pressed the comm button. Who is this? What's your operating number? Then the comm popped and the control room was filled with a roar of white noise. Tooth winced and killed the volume, then tried the comm again. Detention block AA-23, what is your status? Report, please. He was answered by static. He tried a few more times, then gave up. Nothing. Calm down. Sloan looked up at Commander Pohl. We should send a squad. I have a security team ready and waiting. Pohl held up a hand. Keep them on standby. She turned to Tooth. Ensign systems report. If there's a reactor leak, it could be serious. We'll need to get engineering in. Tooth brought up data feeds at his console, then sat back and shook his head. He tapped a button and the main screen changed from the docking bay view to a schematic of the power grid for this hemisphere of the station. Power systems in normal status. Output is steady, no variables detected. No reactor leak then, said Sloan. Ma'am, the squad is ready to go. Paul nodded. Send them in, but we need to report this. Get me Grand Moff Tarkin. Sloan nodded and turned to her own comm deck, selecting the channel before calling it up. Over bridge ready room came a female voice from the desk. Grand Moff Tarkin, please. Grand Moff Tarkin is currently in conference. Commander Shear took his head and strode over to the command dais. He stepped up to the chair and pulled it around, then cut into Sloan's comm channel from the panel on the armrest. This is Station Control West, Commander Shear. This is a priority red request. Put us through to the Grand Moff immediately. Wait. One moment, sir. The comm chimed again. Yes? It wasn't a question, it was just a statement, spoken by an old man with a clipped accent. Paul ground her teeth. She had only met Grand Moff Tarkin twice, and that was 2 times too many. Already she could imagine the cloying scent of lava, the rich purple flowering herb that seemed to hang around the battle station's chief commanding officer like a cloud. She met Commander Sheard's gaze as he made his report to their superior. We have an emergency alert in detention block AA-23. The princess? Put all sections on alert. Paul felt the breath caught in her throat. Princess? What princess? Man, Tarkin should be more careful about who he lets know about Leia. And then she heard the voice of the man Tarkin was in conference with, the deep, resonant bass voice echoing down the open comm channel. Well, perhaps man was the wrong word, because who knew what was inside that suit? Obi-Wan is here. The Force is with him. The comm clicked off. Ah, man, Tarkin should be more careful to, turn the comm off before Vader says something. Lord Vader, Tarkin's advisor, his enforcer. Paul knew that he was aboard the station, but even so, hearing him speak sent a chill down his spine. She looked at Sheardon, saw his throat bob as he gulped. It seemed that Vader had that effect on a lot of people. Then Paul realized that the control room had gone quiet, the constant murmuring of the crew absent as they all watched the 2 commanders. Now it was Paul's turn to swell. Over at the console, Sloan sat with her back rigid, her hands hovering over the console, ready to accept the next order. Beside her, Tooth mimicked her posture, but he looked pale, his own hands curled tightly in his lap. Commander Paul gestured to the sub-lieutenant. Send in the squad. Let's get the situation under control. Then she walked up to the command dais as, behind her, Sloan gave the order. You're welcome to stay, Commander, said Sheard as he entered as he stood by the empty dais chair. But Paul rolled her neck, took a deep breath, and gave her colleague a smile. No thanks. My watch is done. Good luck, Commander. As she headed to the turbolift ready for a shower, something to eat, something to drink, something quite strong, perhaps, Commander pommeled Paul tried to ignore the growing sense of unease and the rolling ball of cold that seemed to have taken the place of her stomach. She didn't know what was going on. With the old freighter with the detention block, Tarkin had said princess, hadn't he? What was that about? But it wasn't her problem, not anymore. Wonder why they aren't curious about Obi-Wan. Let Sheard handle it, and she could read his report in the next shift. A shift that Paul hoped would be another 12 hours of glorious routine boredom. Now that would be perfect. The Baptist by Needy or Corafor. There's something alive in here, Luke Skywalker. When they came, she wasn't ready. She was asleep, so her guard was down. Vodrans didn't usually come this deep into the swamps. Ah, Vodrans. They don't show up often, do they?
No.
Let's see. Mostly just in the old role-playing source books. One showed up in Knight Errant, right?
One did.
I'm pretty sure I saw one of the comic panels that had something that looked like a Vodran in it.
Yeah, you're probably right.
They surrounded her before they could have or she could have known they were there. Still, Omi had the spirit of a warrior, and so she was fighting as she woke. Rough, leathery Vodran hands grasped each of Omi's tentacles, their thick, hard nails pressing into Omi's soft flesh, hauling her out of the water. They shouted instructions to one another in their only language that always reminded her of the thin scum on the surface of the water when too much light came through the trees. She thrashed and rippled her flesh transparent. But she wasn't much bigger than each of them was. She twisted her body, attempting to bite at limbs or torsos, but she was caught. Then something stabbed into her and she felt cold flood into the sensitive spot between two of her tentacles. Her strength left her. Through an awful haze, she was powerless to stop her capture. They rolled each of her tentacles into a large ball and shackled them all with thick, slimy, magnetized metal bands. She was fading, losing consciousness as she held up her eye stalk, taking in all their woe-drawn faces. Hard, knobbed, expressionless. She fell into the darkness as several of them hauled her into the spiritual tank that was like a body-sized bubble that would not pop. She should have looked around at the swamp, her home, one last time. But instead she was unconscious before her body settled on the bottom of the tank. She dreamed of home. Soft land she could travel over. Warm, rich waters, squelching mud, blast of swamp gas, spindly trees. Yeah, there was music, there was play, and there was plenty to eat and watch. Okay. I've held it off long enough. This is a Dianoga, a damn sewer squid. And they have music. They are civilized. They are intelligent despite all evidence to the contrary. Oh boy.
Actually, I got something to say as well. Well, if Josh says the Dianogas are civilized and intelligent, basically this is what comes to mind. I say, my friend, what is that thing? What is that thing coming out of that metal beast? Oh dear, Imperials! Oh, there goes the planet.
Oh my, you pull off that accent perfectly. We're gonna need you to use that again. That's amazing. Omi moved about the swamp knowing that she belonged, her eye stalk swiveling as she traveled, seeing so much of the world. When she settled in for a deep night's sleep, she was safe and warm, her mind not on survival, but on where she planned to go next. Omi woke, instantly remembering that she'd been captured, and instinctively pulled her tentacles in. When she was sure nothing was grabbing her, she took inventory. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tentacles. All intact. So not an octopus, a septopus. And so Omi settled some, glancing around. She was in a thick, clear crystal sphere, its lid screwed on tightly, the better to preserve the gases in the swamp water. The sphere was positioned against a window, among various other cargo. As far as she could tell, she was the only living thing in this place. Large and small white containers were stacked to the high ceiling. A narrow pathway led to an open doorway. Omi could see the swamplands right out her window, probably beyond a flat, hard-looking plain of land. And she'd seen those flying metal beasts before, passing across the sky far above the trees, so large that she could be inside them and live. They flew here and there. She never imagined she'd be swallowed by one, contained in a crystal bowl. She pressed herself against her transparent prison, trying to get as close to home as possible. What do you think they were planning on doing with her? Eating her? Dianogas are tasty from what I hear. Everything began to rumble, the cargo stack shaking but not falling. The water in her tank sloshed her this way and that. She turned her eye stalk to the window and realized her home was retreating. At first slowly, then faster than she could imagine. Something seemed to be pulling it down. What would happen to the swamplands if it was pressed into the ground? She shut her eye. Had this large beast just destroyed her home? And it was in this way Omi experienced her first sense of anti-gravity. She began to float about in her tank, losing her sense of location. None of this is possible, was all she kept thinking. None of this is possible, but it is happening. Criff you, laws of physics! It was as if she were everywhere all at once. Where she had pressed herself to the spear, trying to stay close to home, suddenly she felt her body wanted to be all over the spear. She pulsated with terror, and after experiencing this intense emotion for several minutes, she felt something deep in her being click and let go. She floated upward and then turned to what her eye told her was upside down. But her other senses, like the feeling in her tentacles, the feel of the water, the after her body, told her differently. As she floated, she turned her eye back into the large window and stared for the first time deep into outer space. Nice. Her heart's beats quickened. This was a place she was not supposed to even see. She was meant to travel the swamp, not into this beyond. She felt herself pulled forcibly toward space. Yes. She pressed against the glass of the spear, and suddenly all the rushing and flushing and flowing and stress in her 7 tentacles and head stopped. Everything stopped. Quiet. Nothing. But everything. There was purpose. Omi twitched. Then, involuntarily, her body shifted to being transparent, and then the black color with pricks of starlight. Home will stay home, but you must go, she understood more than heard. Force-sensitive Dianogas that commune directly with the Force itself. Wonderful.
All that's missing is force-sensitive Sarlaccs that talk inside your head.
All this, and they still won't let us have Ewok Jedi. Seriously. Or Gamorrean Sith. Come on. That makes 1,000,000 times more sense than Dianoga prophets.
What about that one Ewok Jedi mentioned in that YouTube video? And what about Gork? He's a Dark Jedi Gamorrean.
Exceptions to the rule. I wanted to be the rule. Also, that one Ewok is from a role-playing game source book and doesn't even have a name. Also, Gork was never intended to be a Gamorrean. That was a retcon. And she knew deep in her hearts that she would not die. No, she was in the right place, in the right moment. Stay your path. This time she heard the words in the deep, complex humming language that her people often spoken when they weren't feeding. To speak this language was to scare away all nearby food. The reverberations carried so completely in the water. To hear it now was like feeling a final breeze from home. Though she was gazing into space, she heard the voice humming from her flesh. Maybe it came from within the tiny links that our people said chained with one another to form her flesh. Atoms? They understand and molecular biology? I mean, I guess even the ancient Greeks had some vague idea of how that worked, so not too crazy. There was a great flash and Omi instantly knew. Oh, neurons. They're thinking of neurons. She was positive, at least in that moment, that this place she was in was going to burn. Then the moment passed, and she was no longer sure of anything except that feeling of oneness. What did that feeling even mean, though? She was no longer so sure. Maybe it was just her fear of death. Not so long ago, she'd been similarly forgetful when she'd gotten into a battle with another of her clan. She remembered that this one had identified as male, and they'd met while crossing over a piece of land going in opposite directions. His name had been Iduna, and she'd been intrigued by his male identity. Oh, right. It's Dianoga are hermaphroditic, I believe is the scientific term. And thus, subgender is more a matter of personal identity to them than biology. Fascinating. Her people could choose the gender they wanted. They were physically hermaphroditic. Oh, why? I really need to learn to read ahead a few paragraphs before explaining something that the story also explains. So one's choice said much about one as an individual. In her years, she had met several females, and even more who were diagonous, the most common gender, non-binary. But she had never met a male until this moment. He had wanted to exchange a few eggs. She had refused, and that was when he grew angry. They'd fought a violent, bloody battle, and during this battle, she'd fought with great focus and precision. To her, the battle had been like an argument that she controlled and eventually won. Iduna soon realized that if he didn't flee, she'd kill him. Thankfully, Iduna chose not to die. You know, I wonder what kind of names all the other Dianogas we've met over the franchise are. Like the one from Shadows of the Empire, and those two at Galaxy's Edge.
Oh, yeah. I remember the ones at Galaxy's Edge.
Yep. Omi may have surprised herself with her incredible combat skills, but she fought. The terror of her error of the experience, the fear of death. But as she fought, the terror of the experience, the fear of death left her so forgetful that she couldn't remember from which direction she'd come. An adrenaline rush. It's like being high. That was how, or what I'm told being high is like. That was how she'd wound up in the southern part of the land instead of the western, napping in the perfect place to be kidnapped and taken into space. Curse. Well, nuts, I forgot what I was going to say. Moving on. What must have been days passed, and Omi was still wondering if the vision of this place going up in flames had been inspired by her intense fear. Obsessing over the fiery vision was all that kept her restlessness and anger over being kidnapped at bay. Her sense of up and down had returned, and Omi felt she could think clearly. Twice a Votran had come and sprinkled some smelly but somehow bland dried fish through a small hole in the lid. It was the taste of this fish that stoked Omi's already heated anger enough to make her escape attempt. Back home, everything had flavor: juices, salts, the ice of food that knew the fish had eaten in their bellies. These people kidnapped her and then fed her food that was an insult, and her only view was of star-filled outer space and the white cargo on the other side of her spear. She had to get out of here. I don't know, star-filled outer space seems kind of pretty. She felt around the lid of her prison with her tentacles, gently touching every gap, even the tiniest ones, testing the pressure. Oh, I get it. This is a reference to how incredibly intelligent the average octopus is. Real clever, or Corafor, I'm definitely pronouncing your name wrong. The lid was made of a smooth, hard substance she had never felt before, and it smelled tangy and smoky. The material it was made of was weak. She pushed and felt some give. She pushed again, using her suckers to grip and turn. The lid clicked and began to easily slide in a circle. I rounded it around. It went until it fell to the floor with a dull thud. She waited and then extended her eye stalk from her swamp water prison. She held herself out. Back in the swamp, she'd moved freely over the damp land from one body of water to the next. Leaving the spear was not much different. Instead of trees, she skirted hard containers made of the same smoky, tangy-smelling, weak material. And instead of moist, fragrant air caressing her skin, the atmosphere was dry and crackling and sucked at her flesh. But the ground was flat, and she moved easily enough over it, smooth and black. When she slithered into the hallway, she paused. All angles dead. Everything smooth and hard and blacker. The insides of this space-traveling beast were either rotten or dead. Never in her life had she seen such a place. But she was still rather young, so there was always more to see. For a second she returned to that epic moment when she looked out into space and become one with it. And with it came her vision that this place was going to go up in flames. Would that be because this beast was going to fly into a sun? So she knows what a sun is and that they're made of flames, or at least flames to her limited understanding. She couldn't think about that now. Her front tentacle twitched. Something was coming. She felt it arriving before she saw it, the vibration buzzing across the floor. So she pressed herself against the wall, turning herself black and shiny, blending in perfectly. Yep, camouflage too. Just like an octopus. The creature rolled up the hall like a large black mouse, or more accurately to Omi, an insect. Black and pod-like in body, swift in motion. Something about it was not right. Mouse droid?
Probably. Also, Omi knows what a sun is, but does Omi know the different ways suns can be destroyed or drained?
Probably not. Omi pressed herself flatter against and up the wall. Like the giant beast they were all traveling in, this large insect was not alive. Hey, don't be droidist. Omi was sure of it. It zipped by without even noticing how the wall bulged, despite being the same color and sheen. Omi stayed this way for several minutes as other similar dead creatures zipped and walked up and down the hall, some tiny as swamp turtles, others tall as Vodrans, and one as large as a hut. Then Omi did see one of the huts pass by with what could have been a Vodran and hard white casing. Stormtroopers. Wonder what they're doing here. And hanging out with huts and droids. Probably an interesting story here.
You made me think of a quote from Jedi Outcast. Stormtroopers, what's the Remnant doing here?
Nice. When the hallway finally grew quiet again, Omi knew this had to be her chance for escape. She smelled moisture nearby. It was beyond the hard walls, and she had to find it before she completely dried out. She rolled into the middle of the hallway, her flesh aching from the lack of moisture, dropping her black coloring to her usual mature deep purple. That's weird. The Dianoga... Do you think she changed color again? Because the Dianoga in the movie was clearly red.
Yeah, how is it Dianogas can change color?
I assume the same way an octopus can. When the hallway finally grew quiet again... Oh wait. She slithered toward the smell of water. She'd reached the end of the hall when two Vodran-like individuals encased in white nearly stepped on her. One exclaimed in a language that was not Vodran. She's never heard basic before. The other pointed something black and long at her. Somehow she knew to move before it blasted fire. Force sensitive. A smoking crater appeared beside her. She only had seconds. Back, toward the one closest to her, instead of away. She was in a hurricane of terror again, just as she had been during the fight with a male member of her tribe, when she'd been fighting for her life. With her terror came that sweet clarity. She shot her two front tentacles toward him, moving like a zipfish. She had to be impossible. She could not miss the parts of its body she needed to grasp. Milliseconds. She could not miss, or she was going to die. She was not meant to die here in this cold, dead place. She was entitled to so much more. She couldn't miss. There was that voice again, reverberating through the space between the milliseconds, through the space in her flesh, telling her to trust, submit. She grasped his legs and was on him in seconds with the spur in her left tentacle, and in this way she stung. She could not see the other. This was the weakness of having only one eye stalk. Her blind spots were many, but she could see in other ways sometimes. Yes. The one was stumbling back, turning toward the other, raising its weapon. She could smell the smoke from the burned ground. She leapt, and as she spun in the air toward the second one, all her tentacles flew out, and for a moment she was a huge 7-point star in space. Her black tentacles slapped him first, then her other three. Her back tentacles slapped him first, then her other three. The fifth and sixth grasped him, and the seventh dug her poisoned spur right through its white helmet into the meaty, soft flesh beneath. It felt similar to smashing through the shell of a large crab. Omi slapped wetly on the floor, her body now screaming with pain. She stared at what she'd done. She swiveled her eye stalk to look up the hallway in one direction and then the other. Her suckers could taste the ground. There was water nearby. But could she make it there without being discovered again? Or was the water just another container? For the first time she wondered where she could even go here, within this beast that would eventually burn. Omi decided to return the way she'd come. Quickly, moving and hiding. Slowly, gradually, even as chaos erupted behind her when the bodies were discovered. She stayed her course and eventually made it back to the transparent bowl, lifting her large lid and pulling it over her. She twisted it firmly back in place and settled on the bottom of the bowl in a scrunched ball just as the guards burst in. She shut her eyes, feeling their scrutiny as they approached her. From underwater, she heard their garbled voices as they stepped up to the glass and tapped on it. She lazily opened her eye and closed it. After a few seconds, she cracked her eye open a bit and watched one of them test the bowl lid's tightness. After walking around her bowl and searching the storage room, the two of them left and only found herself alone again. She stared out into space. Her painful skin recovered to its hydrated self in the swamp water. At least there was that. Okay, this story goes on for a surprising while, so...
Well, next one looks interesting, though. But, yeah, I don't think we're going to get the next one today.
Alright, we'll get hyped for the rest of Omi the Dianoga story, and also for what it felt like for Obi-Wan Kenobi to die.
Yeah, see, that's the one that's going to be interesting. These two, I don't really have much material for them.
Yeah, but soon we'll be getting Force Ghost lore. By the way, do you know Ewoks can be Force Ghost?
I've actually, well, after seeing an Ewok Force Ghost, I believe anything.
Yeah, the things that the Ewoks ran into on Endor, Oh man, that entire damn planet must be a celestial mad science experiment.
To be honest, I would believe anything about the Ewoks. I would pretty much believe that Ewoks are Force users and maybe even shapeshifters.